The Sunderland Union Church, sometimes known as the Zion Union Church, has occupied its spot on the Hill Farm Road off of Route 7A in Sunderland since 1894. But over the years, the church building has fallen into a state of disrepair. Despite occasional efforts to revive it as a church, the building is in need of structural maintenance. Planning and construction of it began in 1890, when town resident Ebenezer Graves donated and deeded the land for the building, with the stipulation that ownership of it would revert back to his heirs if it stopped being a house of religious worship. That, as we'll see, has become a topic of renewed interest, as the town has attempted to find ways to shore up the church building and maintain it. It sits across from the Ira Allen Cemetery, where some of the town's earliest residents are interred. Multi-denominational services were held at the church throughout the 1890s and on into the 20th century, along with social events like square dances, bingo games, even school graduations, as Marilyn Couture, a Sunderland resident, recalls.
The only memory I have of the Union Church was my 8th grade graduation. Of course, the town of Sunderland had just one-room schoolhouses.
Yeah.
And I attended 8th grade in the schoolhouse just to the south of where I live on the Lawrence property. So I attended 8th grade in that church and in that school, that one-room school, and we had our 8th grade graduation there. And I tried very hard to find that graduation picture, and I can't find it.
Oh, no.
I think there were about 8 or 10 of us at the most.
Try online. I found mine.
Well, no.
Her cousin and next-door neighbor, Shirley Latique, recalls her father calling square dances there.
Yeah, at least a couple of summers, and that was Barbara Hill asked him to do that because she wanted entertainment for the people who were renting the little cabins that they had, and she thought that would be fun. So he did have some square dances. In fact, you were there to at least one.
Probably, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Martha Bowen, another Sunderland resident, recalls an earlier time too, when the church was a busy place.
Yep. I can remember the square dances. And we had weddings and suppers. I mean, we used it. So my grandmother was a pillar. And she ran the farm. It had all these guests from all over the place. And she was always there doing things, and if we needed her for something, we could count on her. And she was a gem. I miss her.
Local historian Bill Budd told us more.
The Union Church was intentionally made to be used by a range of local folks that didn't share necessarily the common church, but shared the beliefs. And I think I saw one quote that said it wasn't intended to be used for Buddhist meetings, for example. So no Sufis, things like that. It was used by, what they did was they made arrangements for a minister from the East Arlington Church to come on Sunday evenings and hold a service. And then it was also used for weddings and community events. I think that Shirley mentioned the square dances that were downstairs and called by her father, and scout meetings, for example, and all sorts of groups made it, a community center as much as it could be. But it was never very vital. It was, hopefully people thought we could make this work, and it never really took off.
But as the years went on, attendance began to dwindle. Heating it during the winter was expensive, and there was no septic system. Gradually, it became used less and less, despite occasional attempts to revive it as a church or some sort of community center. The last person to run a ministry there was Reverend Claire North. She conducted services during the early 21st century up until about 2015. She described what it was like.
This organ was donated. I remember Phoebe Ann Lewis used to come and play. While I was here, it was so hard to get an organist. But Phoebe Ann came and sat right up and played there. And this came with the church. And you know, while I was here, these kerosene heaters, the Bowens down here on Hill Lane, they donated them. And that's what we had when fuel got too expensive, because when it came time for the holidays and Christmas and solstice services, we'd have to put the heat on like 2 or 3 days ahead to get it so it would be like coat wearing temperature so that people could like sit through a service. And these curtains, and I'm amazed, I did well buying that fabric. I was down on a trip to New York City and I conspired with Pat Hill, God rest her. She was an extraordinary seamstress, so I conspired with her that we would, you know, get some perfect fabric and we would get this done, because this could be a place, I think, for the minister to vest him or herself, as well as what I heard was that the children, this would be their backstage, Andrew, for their Christmas pageants, and this was the dais that the Christmas pageants would be held. I was minister in residence, and I'm a minister of spiritual science, and spiritual science is an interfaith metaphysical ministry. So that's what it was. And the shingle outside that they put had my title, Reverend Claire Longton North, and my phone number. And people rarely asked. So I got to try a lot of things here. I would open the church for the anniversary of 9/11, in case anybody wanted to come and have quiet time or say a few prayers, or if people needed to talk, I would just make myself available and sit here and be here for the day. So I did that. I did, there were some memorable, beautiful funerals and extraordinary weddings here. I think you'll remember Nancy Otis's funeral. That was just so gorgeous, and filled this church to standing room only. And then there was another wonderful wedding that I'll always remember. The bride's name was Marissa Diaz, and she had a Spanish background. So she had some of her photos taken in the graveyard until death do us part. And so people came because they knew I would facilitate them in using their own ideas and their own words, because to me, in this ministry and how it's worked out in my life, the power of any ceremony is in the words of the people and in them taking that back. There was disrepair, but nothing like what we're looking at now, which has me heart scalded. You know, and we did have plans to paint the church. There had been colors picked out. You know, I remember being in here with a couple of people, and we Murphy's oiled the pews and the floor, and I would have flowers in here and linens. We had a lovely table up there. It was like an altar table, and we had that, so it would be, you know, altars are a great focal point. So we did that for a while. Yeah, you know, the church was, for the most part, kept presentable. And Andrew, the great thing was that even in its rusticity, there was a beauty here, and a peace and a welcome. And it was like a blank slate because people could come in and do whatever they needed to do to make it theirs. It's very emotional for me to be here. It calls up a lot of memories, you know, in bas relief and technicolor and all of that. And I just, it's like I can hear the echoes of the services and the ceremonies. But you know, when I took this on, there were already echoes of services and ceremonies here. I could really feel a great benevolence here, and in spite of the erosion and the disrepair and what we're looking at around us, there's still that great feeling of blessing and benevolence here. Yeah.
Nearby neighbors have been keeping the building maintained as best as possible while the ownership of the building gets sorted out. Ebenezer Graves died in 1890 before the church was completed, and town officials have been trying to track down any descendants. One may have been found who currently lives in California, but until the ownership status is resolved, the town has held off investing money into restoring and repairing it, hoping to find ways of stabilizing it in the meantime. Marty Nadler is a member of the Sunderland Select Board who's been meeting with attorneys and other interested parties to find a pathway forward.
The people working at Town Hall have tried to do some research, and we think we have found an heir. We're not sure. A woman, an elderly woman who lives in California, and we are in the process of trying to track her down and inquire if in fact she is an heir, and then if in fact she is an heir, find out if she's willing to release the property, either to grant it, donate it, or does she want to sell it. And then we'd have to find a legal entity that would then be the recipient of it. As of now, the property still has to be used as a church at least once a year, and until the ownership is released, to some other entity, and then that responsibility will no longer exist, and then we can figure out what to do with the church since it's going to be part of the village center. Right now, the first phase of this, once we have a legal entity that can receive it, and we can find some funds, the first step would be to rehabilitate the building. As of now, the building is in a significant state of disrepair. It has no septic, it has no heat, and it has no water. So it's absolutely unusable. If we can rehabilitate it, then we can consider finding out if we can put a septic in, water or heat, and then find some uses for it. The goal is not for the town to assume responsibility and ownership for it, but hopefully to find a not-for-profit that would assume responsibility for it. Right now, as far as we've moved, we have a meeting scheduled with the chair of the organization that set up the Arlington Common to find out what steps they've taken in creating their not-for-profit and moving forward. So to do a little research, to get some background information. And we're also looking to see if there are other not-for-profits that we can connect to. We have received a grant from the state through the Bennington County Regional Commission of $45,000 to start with. Some of that money is used for legal purposes, some of it is used for an engineering study, and some of it would be used for the opening phases of the rehab. But that will really depend on what the engineering report looks like in terms of the condition of the building. We do know that it's in a significant state of disrepair. The steeple is very much in danger of dilapidation and possibly collapsing. At least the top of it is. And so we really need to do a full engineering study to see what condition it's in and what needs to be done to salvage it and bring it back.
One such potential nonprofit organization has emerged, the Northshire Community Land Trust, said Janet Hurley, the Assistant Director of the Bennington County Regional Commission.
It's the Northshire Community Land Trust, rebranded a few years ago from the Manchester Community Land Trust. And, its mission is exactly this, to protect important community assets like this, and the board feels this church can't disappear, and so it wants to be part of the solution. I think what's going to happen, the board will have to meet at an official meeting and make a decision to actually be the vehicle to own the property. The current legal research suggests that we will need a court order to transfer the property. Currently, the original 1890 grantor may have a few heirs, one at least, that need to relinquish a remainder interest in the property. So there need to be some steps before the land trust can become the owner. One being the land trust board making a decision to be that owner, and secondly, perhaps a court order to name the land trust as an owner. So currently, the ownership is sort of, it's nebulous. There really isn't an owner right now, since the church has stopped functioning regularly as a church. I think some of the last uses that it had were weddings, wedding venues, but I think picnics, community picnics is an idea that people have, funerals, of course, but what's going to have to happen is that there's going to have to be some community outreach to determine what does the community want this to be. There are some pretty extreme limitations on this property. There is no water, there is no sewer, no septic. The property is very small. It's just a postage stamp of a lot with the church on it. So depending on what uses are pursued, perhaps parking could be had at the, we're standing in the Ira Allen Cemetery, which is owned by the town. Perhaps that could serve as an area for parking. And, we'd have to think about how, what functions could there be that might not need water or sewer? Or is there a way to get a water source and a wastewater system, or even maybe composting toilet on the site, or even across from the site? The property across from Hill Lane and across from Hill Farm Road both have conservation easements. There may be some opportunity to utilize those to some degree for such a small system. So, none of this has been looked into yet. They're just ideas. And, but, what the stakeholders that are involved in this, the town select board, the town planning commission, the neighbors who have functioned as the church prudential committee, the land trust, and, we can't lose this. This is an iconic piece of Sunderland that can't be lost. So the primary goal is to save this church from, falling in on itself eventually.
We'll leave you with one last fun fact. Did you ever wonder what that marble stone in front of the church was for? Apparently, that was for the ladies to step out of the carriage and land on something firm instead of the mud. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.